So we're going to get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to our very first CS Disseminate event, Self-Archiving 101. We are so excited to see so many people here. You've really far exceeded our expectations in terms of how many people have registered compared to when we first started just to talk about putting these workshops together. So thank you all for being here. So I would like to just, actually, just before we get started, I might just ask everyone to mute their microphone because I do think some bit of noise is coming through. And I'd also like just to make everyone aware that we are recording the workshop and we will make the video available on our website, so that should be up there later this week. If you prefer for your video, for example, not to be shown in the website or on the website, it's probably best for you just to turn off your video during the presentation. And similarly, we'll likely take a few screenshots as we're presenting, so they might be posted on social media as well. Our names are Elaine Carney and Helen Long, and we are both co-founders of CS Disseminate, as well as early career researchers in communication sciences and disorders. I am a postdoctoral researcher at Boston University, and Helen is a very recent PhD graduate from the University of Memphis, as well as a school-based SLP. We're also joined this evening by some of our wider CS Disseminate team, including Mariam El-Amin, Meredith Harold, Mary Alice Keller, James Borders, and Mary Spratford. So I'm going to kick off this workshop with giving you a little bit of background about CS Disseminate as well as self-archiving. And then Helen is going to do a much deeper dive into the self-archiving steps. And then at the end, I'm going to come back to lead a couple of breakout sessions and a Q&A period. If you have any questions during the workshop, we just ask that you pop them into the chat box, and then one of the other CS Disseminate members is going to answer them right there. Or alternatively, you can wait until the Q&A period, and then at that point, we'll ask people to unmute and just ask their questions there. So who are we? What is CS Disseminate all about? So CS Disseminate is a grassroots initiative that we started last July. So we kind of came together as a group of volunteers and scientists and clinicians to support the accessibility of research in the field of communication sciences and disorders. And our goal is really quite simple, and that is to provide CSD scientists with resources to learn how to make their research accessible. So we are not a paid service. We are not a repository where you upload your research to. We are just simply providing educational resources to other scientists in order to help them open up their research. And so with that goal in mind, our goal then for today's workshop is to introduce you to self-archiving, your free and legal versions of your own manuscripts. So at this point, we'd like just to gauge where everyone is in their own self-archiving journey. So we're going to start a poll. And the poll question is, how much experience do you have self-archiving? And then you can answer this 1 to 4, 1 being a novice. So at that, if you're a novice, you're not really sure what self-archiving is, you haven't started yet. A beginner is someone who's learning about the process. 3 will be intermediate. So you're started to self-archive, but you don't yet do it regularly. And 4 would be expert, where you regularly self-archive already on your own website or institutional repository. Okay, so it looks like our results are in. And pretty much as expected, the majority of attendees are kind of falling in that novice and beginner categories, and we have a few people who are already at the intermediate stage. And so when we were setting up this workshop, we were really setting it up with novice and beginner learners in mind. So we're not assuming any prior knowledge. We're going to cover everything from scratch, but there is quite a bit of information. So I think even if you're at that intermediate stage, there will still be lots of tips and tricks for you to pick up along the way. So self-archiving is where you make a version of a manuscript available on a personal or institutional website with free access for those interested. The catch, however, is that it's not typically as simple as just linking to that nicely formatted publisher PDF that you get when your research has been published. Typically, or actually always, we have to look at the journal policies to see what version we can post to our own websites. And then this version, depending on the journal, may be the submitted, the accepted, or the published version of a manuscript. And Helen is going to go into a lot more detail about what those versions are when we get to that step in the process, but this is just kind of giving you a little bit of information as we start to talk about what self-archiving is about. Self-archiving is also called Green Open Access, and it's just important to know that it differs from Gold Open Access, where you pay fees to a publisher to make your work open access. So the goal is still to make it open access, but we're doing so in a free way while still following all of the copyright rules, so we're not doing anything illegal in this process. Before we get into more details about self-archiving, I want us to kind of just take a quick step back and think about the research lifecycle and why self-archiving might be important. So if we think of a typical study, and of course this is an oversimplified schematic of how research works, but if we think of a typical study, we start with hypothesis generation, we do some data collection, we analyze those data and interpret them, and then we write up the results and disseminate them. And the hope is that, down the line, there's an uptake of findings by key stakeholders, whether that's other researchers, clinicians, if the research is clinically applicable, as well as policymakers. However, one of the biggest barriers in moving from dissemination to uptake of findings is access. And so if you do not have institutional access, you're constantly faced with these paywalls, which I'm sure we've all seen, where you're asked to pay between $30 and $60 just to access a paper, and that's ever before you know whether that paper is really relevant or has the information that you're looking for. So for a lot of people, this is not a realistic option. And then as a result, all interested researchers cannot read your work, and they're left, recreating the wheel in their own work, leading to inefficiencies in the scientific process. Clinicians may not be able to read your work, and that's a real significant barrier to staying on top of current evidence and implementing evidence-based practice. And studies have often also indicated that it can take 17 years from research conduct to clinical uptake, and this, of course, is a time frame we'd all like to see reduced. And finally, policymakers cannot read your work, and that means that system level change can also not happen. So lots of reasons why we want to improve access to our research. As we've been kind of having these conversations, with colleagues and with people on social media about, encouraging people to start self-archiving, we hear a lot of concerns about or barriers that people have when it comes to self-archiving. And these include things like, I don't have time to create a website, or people can just email me for a copy. Why would I post it online? Maybe my lab doesn't have funds for open access, or just like a general theme of we're already overburdened and it's just really not possible for us to take on yet another task. And these are all really, really valid concerns, and we hear you and we agree with you in many ways. But there is a reason why we're asking you as authors of research papers to self-archive. And that is because you're the only people who retain the right to self-archive, and no one else can do it on your behalf. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are benefits to you as well. And so with self-archiving, things to keep in mind. Self-archiving is free. And so if you're not spending that, $1,000 to $10,000 on paying for open access fees via your publisher, you can then keep that money and instead maximally invest that grant funding in your own research and trainees. And if you're submitting, multiple papers open access in a given year, that is really a lot of money that you could potentially free up for other uses. Self-archiving is also associated with a citation benefit. And what's really interesting about this is that the benefit when you self-archive is greater, leading to 30% more citations than when you make your research open access by simply paying the publisher fee. So for some reason, self-archiving leads to more citations than just the gold open access route. So not only are you saving money, but you're potentially going to be cited more as well. And then the last benefit we wanted to highlight was that when you do self-archive, you increase the visibility of your work and the ability to reach new audiences outside of academia, which means that people, for example, maybe the population you're studying or other just interested members of the public can read your work as well. So at this point, I'm going to hand you over to Helen, who's going to walk you through the self-archiving steps.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to review each of the self-archiving steps as they're outlined on our website. If you visit our website, you'll find these exact steps under the For Scientists section on the main menu, so you can review this information at any time online. And because many of us are beginners, the first step is to review the key terms used in self-archiving and open access circles. But your actual action steps are steps 2 through 6, as you identify the what, the when, and the where that you can self-archive, according to individual journal or publisher policies, which we'll review how to do now. Okay, so the most important word of the day, if you're not familiar with this topic, is self-archiving, which is a way to support green open access. In a lot of circles, it also means the same thing as green open access. And this is the act of making a version of your manuscript available to the public. Typically, this involves an author keeping a running list of citations of their publications on something like a personal website that includes links to view a version of your paper that is legally permissible. But the key here is that the version you're allowed to share publicly can vary by publisher. And the truth is that most scientists in all fields are not, unfortunately, doing this the legal way. So our goal is to give you, specifically CST scientists, the resources and knowledge on how to self-archive your research responsibly so that it can remain accessible to everyone, and so that you don't get a takedown notice from publishers with the risk of legal ramifications. So we're hoping to teach or help you to continue taking special care to only share the version of your manuscript that's allowed by publishers, whether this is the accepted, the submitted, accepted, or the published version. So what is the difference between these versions? So consider the timeline of the publication process. Once you've finished your paper, you submit that version to a journal for peer review. That version that you submitted to the editorial manager is your submitted version. This is also commonly known as a preprint. And once your article has undergone one or more cycles of peer review and is finally accepted for publication, congratulations, that version is your accepted version, which is also known as a postprint. And so then your paper undergoes the fancy formatting and gets the journal logo stamped on the first page. And that version is the published version, and also called an off-print or a published PDF. So there are a few key differences here that are important to understanding why journal policies can be so strict about which version you can self-archive. And the most obvious difference between the pre and the postprint is that the postprint is peer-reviewed and the preprint is not. Your postprint and the published PDF are technically the same document in terms of content, but they differ in one major way. And that's that the publisher owns the copyright to the pretty published version, but not to that admittedly boring looking double-spaced accepted version. And so they don't own the copyright to the words in the manuscript, typically, only to the formalized styling of the paper, which means most journals can't prevent you from sharing your postprint, although on their website, it's usually worded like they're allowing you to do so. So now we're not going to give you any absolutes because every publisher or journal policy is a little different, which is why it's important for you to make sure you're checking journal policies for each journal that you have either published or submitted a manuscript to before you share any single version. So how can we quickly find these individual journal policies? If you're in the early stages of your career with 1 or 2 manuscripts under your belt, you're admittedly at an advantage in this stage because you're getting started early and you only have to go back and find individual policies for a few manuscripts. But if you've published many articles and you're taking this incredible step of ensuring that you're sharing the legal version of your article, this stage may take a little longer, and you may want to bring in a student to help you with this somewhat tedious but important step to get started. And it's easier to go on as you go through time and publish more papers. But either way, these 3 websites can really help you moving forward. And these websites aggregate individual journal policies on self-archiving. And depending on which website you use, you either enter the name of the journal that you're submitting or you've published in, or you enter the DOI of your paper. And then they'll give you more detailed information on what you're looking for. And ultimately, when in doubt, and if you truly don't trust any website that offers this kind of information, you can always search the submission guidelines of a journal and just do a search for terms like self-archiving or preprint policy, because they typically include some sort of description in the submission guidelines about what's allowed. And so if you do have a lot of manuscripts that you need to figure out the journal policies on, we've created this template to help you keep track of what you find in an at-a-glance format. So let's take a look at this website, this spreadsheet really quick. So we've split up the information into 2 sections on where you can self-archive. Let's scroll down a little bit. Okay, so specifically for a lab website or a personal website or an institutional repository here. And we've included the names of some more common journals that researchers in CSD tend to submit to. But if you commonly submit to other journals, you can just save a copy of this version. I believe it's included in the handouts. And then you can always add more rows as you go on. And you can see that we've just added a yes or no regarding whether you're allowed to share your submitted, accepted, or published version to either your author webpage or the repository. And then you can do the same below for any other self-archiving locations that you choose to use. And of course, you can manage this information in whatever way you want, but we've created this just to help you moving forward. Okay, so searching the journal policy information helps you identify which version that you can legally share, since all journals vary regarding its permissions for each version. But they can also vary on when you can legally self-archive. So those 3 websites can help you find all that information, and I'll show you how to use one of those websites after we've gone through the remaining steps, just so you know exactly what you're looking for when you use these websites on your own. Okay, so like I said, the publisher or the journal can dictate when you can self-archive. So many of you already know that journals can place an embargo on your article, essentially locking it behind a paywall for a period of time after submission, usually 6 to 12 months of time post-publication before you're allowed to share it. And the length of an embargo and the version to which the embargo applies can vary. For example, there may be a 6-month embargo on your ability to share your published PDF, but there may be no embargo placed on your accepted version. So you can share the accepted version immediately post-publication. And that's just an example. Some journals place embargoes on preprints, but most of the time you can submit a preprint to either a server or upload to your website around the time of submission. And again, at the end, I'll show you how to quickly find embargo information for any individual paper or journal. Okay, So the fifth step involves identifying where you can archive a version of your paper per journal policies. There are many website options that allow hosting manuscripts, but we're going to outline these three options today because these specific locations tend to be the most permissive and the most accessible to the general public. And what we mean by this is that if any person does a Google search of terms or keywords in your paper, hosting a version of your paper on one of these options will usually appear in that search and be available to anyone. And it's really important to note here that a lot of people might ask why we haven't included ResearchGate here. And that's because only people who have a .edu email address, in other words, someone who's associated with a university, can access ResearchGate. So it's closed to the general public who have no way of accessing resources on ResearchGate. So that is, of course, a legitimate option for you to share an appropriate version of your paper, but we are just highlighting those that can be the most accessible to everyone. Okay, so the first option on that list, if we're going to follow a similar order of the publication process, are preprint servers. And these servers are dedicated repositories specifically used for hosting papers that have been submitted but not yet peer-reviewed. Some popular servers are bioRxiv, the Open Science Framework, which is more of a general repository for making any of your research open access, but they do also have a dedicated preprint server. And PsycArXiv is a subsidiary of the OSF. And so when you upload your preprint to these servers, they do undergo a screening process where people behind the scenes determine if your paper is a good fit for that repository and if it meets their guidelines for sharing your preprint. And a lot of people may wonder why they should share a non-peer-reviewed version of their paper. Ultimately, you want to share your accepted or published version, right? But there are actually benefits to sharing your preprints. The first is that you get visibility of your work, meaning that you can lay claim to the work that you have completed, especially if it's a hot topic area that a lot of people are starting to delve into. And the truth is that peer review takes a long time. After you submit a paper, the journal has to select an editor who then reads your paper, who then identifies appropriate reviewers who need time to read your paper and send back comments. You need time to revise your paper. Sometimes you have to go through that process over many stages. Sometimes it's rejected and you have to start the whole process over. And this can take months if you're lucky, or years before your paper is actually accepted. So being able to share a version of your paper as early as possible allows you to receive credit for the work that you've done, even if it's not fully refereed. Another benefit is to having a preprint is that it allows you to get additional feedback from peers alongside the journal reviewers. Preprint servers, for example, have a comment section for each paper that allows others to comment and give feedback on your work. And a final benefit is that posting to something like a preprint server gives you a citable DOI, or the digital object identifier, which is kind of like a social security number for your paper. And it always links directly to a specific article and only that one. Okay, but there do remain some cons to using preprint servers. The first is that some, but not many, journals don't accept manuscripts that have been posted to a preprint server, unfortunately. This typically has to do with regulations associated with journals not accepting research that has been previously published. But most journals today, including ASHA journals, accept that submitting a manuscript to a preprint server does not count as prior submission or publication. But because some journals still have this rule, it's always important to check the policies on preprints prior to sharing. Another disadvantage is that some preprint servers don't allow you to update your preprint through the revision process. This means that if you have more than one draft of revisions of your paper, you may not be allowed to update the server to the most recent version. And then third, the media uptake of non-peer-reviewed work can have unintended consequences that we need to be cognizant of. The entire purpose of peer review, of course, is to act as a filter to ensure that only high-quality research is published. And remember that there's little filtering involved in the process of screening preprints. So we should always be slightly more guarded when citing non-peer-reviewed research or reading the media uptake of preprints as it relates to the interpretation of the data. Okay, so another location that you may be able to archive versions of your manuscript is an institutional repository. And this can be a submitted, accepted, or published version. Typically, university libraries manage these databases, which allow you to upload versions of your paper. And sometimes they can help you find policies on what, when, and where you can upload. Not every university has one of these. So the best way to find out is to ask your university library. And I promise you that they would be ecstatic to hear that someone is actually reaching out to them to participate in this process. Okay, and the last option we've highlighted is to host your research on either a university laboratory website or a personal professional website. We really recommend these because these are the ones that you have the most autonomy in terms of its management. If you don't already use one of these, creating a website can take an afternoon of your time, depending on how much information you're looking to share. And if you're interested in using a personal website, there are many free options that don't require any knowledge of coding. At a minimum, we recommend you post a list of the citations of your authored or co-authored papers, as well as either the uploaded version that you're allowed to share, or links out to versions that you are able to share to either the preprint server or a repository. Okay, so I've taken a screenshot of just some examples. This is Elaine's website. And she includes the title, the authors, and then you can see that she includes links for the PDF that she was allowed to share, and a link to the copy of the citation of the paper, and as well as a link out to the actual DOI of the publisher's website. And that's always good to include to appropriately link to the publisher in any way. This is a screenshot of my website. It cites my research in a slightly different way. I have just the full citation with an active DOI link, which you can just click on to go to the publisher website, as well as a button that you could link that links to either a version of the paper as an uploaded version, or it will link out to an external server. And it might just link directly to the publisher website if it has been paid as an open access article. All credit goes to my advisor for that, for paying for the gold open access for those. Or on the very last option, there may be no button if that paper is currently under an embargo. But I did try to include as many options as possible so that as many people as possible could view that paper while it's under an embargo. Okay, so you can get really creative with how you use a website, sometimes more so than what you can do with a university lab website. We created a short demo, which is posted on the CS Disseminate website to show you just how easy it really is to create your own website. I personally like Google Sites just because I think it's a little less clunky than Wix, which is what we used in the demo, but you find what works for you. And we also wanted to make a shout out to two other scientists who are featured on our website, Drs. Megan Roberts and Kelly Farquharson, who are established researchers with many publications under their belt, and they have found the time to self-archive their research. They're kind of like self-archiving hipsters because they've been doing it since before it was cool. But this isn't a new concept. We're not introducing this as a brand new concept. But we want you to know that people are doing this, and so you have the opportunity to do the same as well. Okay, so now I'm going to quickly go through how you can use one of these journal policy search engines. I personally like Sherpa Romeo the best for searching policies because I think it's the most comprehensive and it stays the most up to date, I think. Also, I used to pronounce it Sherpa Romeo, but I recently learned that Sherpa also has a website called Sherpa Juliet. So it only makes sense that this is Sherpa Romeo. Okay, so when you go to this link, again, this is on our website, this is in our handouts. Here on this website, you just type in the name of the journal. I'm just gonna search JSLHR because that's a common ASHA journal. You can type in the acronym and it will pull it right up. And the first information it gives you is the name of the journal, also the publisher. And then you scroll down to the publisher policy information. And this is really the bulk of the information that you want to see. Okay, so we're going to start at the very bottom. At the bottom, whenever you search for any individual journal, this website always includes some links that if you aren't sure how to interpret this information, I'll go through some of it in a second. If you just can't figure out what any of this means, it always links directly to this other information that you're looking for, including the copyright and permissions. This is saying ASHA recently is doing their own preprint service. Okay, so I'm going to scroll up. Okay, we're going to start at the bottom as if we had just submitted our paper and we want to know what we can do with our submitted version. So you open that link and you can see that there's no embargo. So the second that you submit that version of your paper, you can go ahead and host it somewhere. But where am I allowed to host it? There's a section called location. And this says you can either host your submitted version on the author's homepage, which is either your personal website or your lab website, your institutional repository if you use one, and also a preprint repository, so any of those servers that I mentioned. Okay, and then the condition for hosting a submitted version is that you have to update with a link to the published article upon publication. Typically, preprint servers will do this automatically. Okay, and then you'll notice that there are several pathways per published or accepted version. And the difference between these is the funding. So funders also can dictate how you're allowed to share, versions of your manuscript. So let's say your manuscript has been accepted and you have decided to archive your accepted version. Well, if you've received funding from either of these sources, then you have to follow pathway B. If you do not have funding, or if you have funding from anyone else, you have to follow pathway A. Pathway A says there's no embargo, you can immediately share your accepted version upon publication. You're allowed to host it on your website or the institution's repository, and then that also includes a few conditions. But let's be honest, most of us really want to share our published version, right? So let's see what our options are for that. So again, we have multiple pathways. If you have funding from the NIH, you have to follow pathway B, and this says that there is a 6-month embargo before you can share a version of your published manuscript. If you have any funding from these sources, you have to follow pathway C. This pathway has an open access fee, which means you would have to pay those fees to be able to share your manuscript anyway. And again, we see the location. there are a few options available for that. And it looks like if you have funding from the NIH, the only location that you're allowed to share the published version is on PubMed. And then finally, if you have funding from anywhere else, or if you have no funding, you have to pay the open access fee in order to share your published version. So you can see that the published version is a bit more locked down, but if you decide to share your accepted version, there are far less limitations on what you're allowed to do with it. So that's really what we're trying to encourage you to open your mind to start doing. And that is that the accepted version is the same as the published version. It's just not as pretty, right? Technically, you can make it a little prettier, right? I like to make mine single spaced, you know, that really just kind of cleans it up immediately. Okay, so that is how you read the Sherpa Romeo website, okay? And then next, we're going to, oops, not next. We have a few more things to go through. Okay, so once you've found your journal policies and you figured out exactly what, where, and when you want to self-archive, then you can post them, right? Once you've found what you can do with one of those websites. If you're allowed to share your submitted version, you can upload it to the allowed location, and you may want to add some sort of preprint tag, as you see in this picture, just so you're making it very clear that this is a preprint from the beginning. And then on your website, you can post the citation and the DOI link, and then a direct link to wherever you hosted it. Okay, and if you're allowed to self-archive the accepted version, we recommend you attach the user license, this user license to the first page. This is just an updated version of the tag that you saw on the accepted, that you saw on the accepted, the submitted manuscript. And this really just includes the name of the journal that it was accepted to, as well as the DOI link. And I've also seen some people including the licensing information as well. And so then you can post the full citation, the DOI link, and then this manuscript to wherever you're allowed to upload it to. And then, like I said, there's not many journals that you're allowed to self-archive the published version, even if you've paid the gold access, open access fee. But most publishers still want to drive traffic directly through the publisher website. But if you're allowed to share the published version, you can just download a copy of that published PDF and post it alongside the full citation with the DOI link on your website. Okay, and again, all those steps are on our website.
Okay, thanks, Helen, for all of the detail. We're now going to move into our first breakout room, and we're going to give everyone a chance to try out these steps yourself. So we're going to randomly assign people to breakout rooms of 5 people. And then once you're in there, you can briefly introduce yourselves and then select a recent publication from someone in your breakout room. Or if it just so happens that you're in a room where no one has yet published, and I know we have a lot of students joining us today, so that might be the case, you can also choose a journal that you read articles in often. And then, so either for that article or for that journal, find the copyright policies for the relevant publisher or journal and identify which version of the manuscript you can archive, when you can archive it, and where you can archive it. We're going to give you about 6 minutes to complete this task, and we'll give you a 1-minute warning before the breakout session is going to end. If at any point you would like us to come, join your room, you can request that while you're in the room. And the other thing is that it might be helpful for you to access the slides while you're in your breakout room. So I'm just going to copy that link into the chat, and just make sure that you open the slides before you move into the breakout room, because once you move in, you won't have access to this chat anymore. Okay, it looks like we're all almost, if not all, back. So at this point, I want to ask a couple of people just to volunteer to describe what it was that they did in the breakout room and what they found. Was it easy? Was it hard? Was there anything unexpected about this process? So if you're willing to volunteer, you can just unmute and tell us about the process for you.
Yeah, I can do it. Yeah. I don't know if you hear me though. Yeah, okay.
Yes, yeah.
Because my sound is a little bit clunky. So, yeah, so the thing is, I actually found the process quite intuitive. There is like a couple of things that I was confused, but the first one is when I looked for conferences, because I'm more publishing in conferences than in proper journal. Mm-hmm. Actually, conferences are not listed in this thing. So I think that's an important thing to know for idiots like me. Conferences that journal.
No, that's actually just on that point. That's a great point that you brought up, and it's actually something that came up earlier today. I think, I'm not sure if it was you or somebody else in the registration information had made a note of it, and we actually just don't have the answer for you yet, but it's definitely something we're also interested in. I think it might come down to it's not clear to me, like if you sign over copyright with your conference presentations. I know that for many conferences I've attended, that isn't the case, in which case you would retain the right to post it wherever you want. But I guess we'd always say be cautious and look into the rules around your specific conference and the work that you're posting.
Well, the thing in my field is we have two key conferences mainly, and one is already kind of saying open access for everyone, and we don't care. So the problem is solved for this one. For the other one, it's kind of affiliated to another journal. So actually, you can find the information by looking at the journal and then navigating a bit on the IEEE website. So it's kind of a thing, but it's just the point was more to say that if you look on the Romeo thing and you look for the conference, you're not going to find it.
Okay. Yeah, so, that's a good point. And that's something we can include in our information going forward.
And the other thing was actually some journals are going to come in a drop-down menu when others are not necessarily going to be listed. So the trick is it's not because you're not going to see the journal on the drop-down that you should not press enter. Because actually the journal is going to come and be visible if you validate the query to find the journal, even if it's actually not listed in a short list.
Okay, yeah.
So sometimes it's just it's more it's actually worth it to simply do the extra step of clicking and actually see, okay, I don't have a result, because you might actually have a result corresponding to what you wrote before.
Okay.
So that's
the take home is to always click the search button.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah. No, these are great tips for people, because it's the kind of thing when you use it so many times, you stop thinking about your first impression of a website. So yeah, that's a good tip for people to know for sure.
So that's kind of the good takeaway, the two takeaways I got from the things.
Great. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to share their experience with it? Or if you have any questions about the process, we're happy to answer those as well.
We actually, this is Kelly Farquharson. We actually had a question come up about if, for instance, so it was news to me that ASHA is allowing preprints in their journals now. And I had not recently checked, but it sounds like that's a newer change, which is excellent. When that happens, is it the case then that anything that was published after they come up with the preprint, when their policies change, what goes into retroactive? What can possibly be applied retroactively? Is it everything that's ever been published? Let's say in LSHSS, for instance, can you start to post those kinds of things, or is it just kind of going forward?
That makes perfect sense, and that's a great question. I don't have the answer for you right now, and I'm not sure if anyone else from our team wants to jump in.
My first guess, I do know that they just started allowing preprints. I mean, maybe in the past month or two. So they may be brand new to this process as well. So I also don't know the answer to your question, but my first guess would be that any publication that you have submitted moving forward, you can allow, you can submit your manuscript to. But retroactively, I don't know the question to that, or the answer to that.
Right. And for preprints, it may not be. So I guess your question is, if you have something that's already in process, can you then post it in as a preprint during that process now?
Yeah, I guess that's part of the question. And I think even maybe more broadly of just when the policies for any sort of journal changes, like let's say they don't allow post prints ever, then all of a sudden they allow post prints. Does that mean that you can go back and start archiving post prints, going back years?
Right. My
Just
guess
in
is that
general.
you could, and only insofar as I've never seen them saying something like, oh, for articles published between, 1995 and 2005, these rules apply, and then later on, these other rules apply. So it's almost like you could really never know. You could never know what they were retrospectively unless you happen to have been checking like every single year or whatever all along. So I think it would cautiously be fine to post, to take whatever current rules are there and apply them retrospectively. But with preprints, I would just be a little bit more careful, because if that, if certain rules were in place when you submitted, you may not want to jeopardize that process, because that's probably what you agreed to. Any other questions? Okay.
I had a comment. So my group looked at the Romeo site, and we searched for a journal, and it told us that it didn't allow any open access policy. But I used the How Can I Share It website and put the same journal in, and it recommended that I check with the publisher. And I went to the publisher's website, and it does have options for sharing. So I think that's a good lesson, just as a caution for everybody. Don't just look at one or two of these conglomerate websites. Make sure that you're looking at your publisher website too.
Yeah, that's a great comment, and definitely something that we would recommend as well. But yeah, I guess the most accurate, up-to-date information is always going to be on the publisher website. So it may be worth taking that extra step to try to go to the source to find the info there as well. In the past, when ASHA made that change to allowing preprints, we noticed it just because, that's just so relevant for us. And then we noticed that, the Sherpa Romeo site was out of date. So we actually just quickly sent them an email, and they updated it within 24 hours, which we were really impressed with. So also, if you do notice a discrepancy, it is worth letting them know, because they are really on it and do really want to have the correct information out there. Okay. So just moving back to our slides here. During registration, we asked everyone to submit questions if they had them. I think in the interest of time right now, I'm not going to go through these, but if you did submit a question and you feel like it wasn't covered in the presentation, we have included all of these questions and our responses in the slides. And as you're going through them, if you find, oh, the answer isn't comprehensive enough, or maybe we just didn't get to the heart of your question, feel free just to reach out to us on email or social media, and we can definitely continue that conversation further as well. So we had planned for one more breakout room, but we are running a little bit short on time. So instead of running the breakout room, I'm going to describe the task to you, and I'm hoping that you can do it in your own time as like an individual goal. So the idea here was that we'd help you develop an action plan. And we do realize that we've given you a lot of information in a small amount of time, but here it's really starting small and coming up with very clear and tangible goals that you can reach in the next year, and especially in the next few months. So what we were hoping that you could do is think about one long-term goal. So thinking, where do you want to be 1 year from now on this self-archiving journey? And what this will look like is going to be different from person to person, depending on where you are now and how much time and resources you have to put into this process. So it might be something like creating your own professional website, or uploading all of your free and legal versions of your publications to your website. Then thinking more short term, what are the next steps you can take in reaching that long-term goal? And here we're suggesting that you identify 3 short-term goals. So tackling one goal a month over the next 3 months, And this might be something like compiling the journal policies for publications from a single year, or if your long-term goal is to create a professional website, then maybe you want to compare 2 website builders to identify how it is you're going to go about that process. And the last thing we suggest you think about is who will help keep you accountable. So maybe there's someone that you know at the workshop this evening who you can keep in touch with about, how you're progressing with all of this. Maybe it's a lab member, a departmental colleague, just someone that you'll check in with and maybe help each other out and keep you on track so that you do reach that 1-year long-term goal. We have also included a link, and it's linked in the chat as well, for an action plan document where you can record these goals. And then periodically on social media, we'll also send out reminders of, like just checking in. Are you achieving your goals? What else can we, do to help you move forward in this process? So with that, we're going to wrap up. We want to thank you all for attending. In the next day or two, we're going to send out an email with a follow-up survey. So we'll just get some feedback about what you found worked in this workshop, what could have been done better, and what it is that you'd like to see us cover in future. We are hosting a repeat workshop, so the very same workshop on Thursday. So there isn't really a need for you to attend again unless you would really like to. But if you do have any friends or colleagues who you think would also be interested in learning about self-archiving, please do send them our way. And the last thing we want to mention is that we are here for you. Our doors are open. Please get in touch if you are stuck in the process, if you have any questions, or if you just want to learn more about what it is that we do. I've included information here for our website, our email, and you'll also find us on Twitter and Instagram. So if you search us at all, you don't have to go far to find us. And again, thank you for attending. We've been really blown away by the response we got to the workshop, and it's been great just to engage with people this evening.